Kalen DeBoer, he said a lot of the right things that fans want to hear at his introductory press conference as Alabama's next head coach. He spoke from the heart. He was honest. And he even said that he knows that there is a vision in place to where the Crimson Tide will keep on rolling going into 2024. But what needs to happen in the immediate future for Alabama to feel stable going into spring football practice? Let's go ahead and talk about it. But if you are new here, well, welcome on into the channel, people. My name is Cole Thompson. I'm a radio show host, and I'm based in Houston, but I talk college football daily. And it is the type of content you enjoy, especially with the mass exodus of coaching searches and transfer portal news. The clock might have struck zero on 2023, but we're not stopping making content anytime soon. Live shows coming up. We got a banner. We'll be recapping 2023. Look ahead to 2024. Now is the perfect time to be alive in the world of college football. So go ahead and smash that subscribe button down below. Leave a comment telling me as an Alabama fan what you want to see DeBoer do in the immediate future. Tell your friends, your family, your mortal enemies, your best of bros, Alabama fans and college football aficionados everywhere about this channel, because we are on the race to become the #1 YouTube show talking college football daily. Go ahead and hit this follow button on social media at Mr. Cole Thompson. I call it Twitter. You call it X. Who really cares what Elon calls it? But that way, conversations surrounding our favorite sport never have to stop flowing. So there's a clear indication that DeBoer has an outline in place for Alabama to be successful. And I want to make this abundantly clear. Whether or not you are a fan of the hire, whether or not you believe that this was the best move by the Crimson Tide, Greg Byrne did. And if Greg Byrne, after 7 seasons of stability, knows what he's doing, then I think you should be content with this move. DeBoer did not need to come from the South to understand Southern football or really understand what the SEC is all about. And he definitely did not need to go be a disciple of Nick Saban to understand what Alabama football is. Everybody in the world of college football knows what Alabama is, what it means, what the ambiance and the pedigree and the poise and the insaturation of Saturdays in Tuscaloosa is all about. And DeBoer gets that. So naturally, he is going to carry that same pedigree over, even though he's not Saban 2.0. And he's not Saban 2.0, but more on that in a minute. He's hired a staff. Ryan Grubb, as of right now, is expected to be his offensive coordinator, but he's also expected to bring over a bunch of the same offensive personnel members. So the vision that worked in Seattle is going to probably be the vision that's working in Tuscaloosa. Step number 1, you have to re-recruit. I did not say recruit. I said re-recruit. There will be kids that absolutely see the vision, watch the offensive personnel, and automatically believe I can be successful here regardless of who's calling the plays. And then there are going to be a few that don't feel that way. Amari Nigblack is now gone. You already lost Isaiah Bond. He is headed to Texas. And you do not want to see a mass exodus of offensive talent leave Tuscaloosa anytime soon. The good news is Jalen Milroe is coming back. You have Julian Sain coming in. You have 2 other quarterbacks on the roster that probably already fit what you want to run. And the proof of concept is there when it comes to rushing attacks and with passing attacks. So for DeBoer, step number 1 is going into that locker room, meeting with these players. Every single year they have exit meetings, and they'll be honest and truthful and tell it like it is. Some players are meant to be here. Some players are the best shot for them to be able to go elsewhere and open up a scholarship spot on the 85-man roster. They got to make some moves. You got to be honest. Look at my offense. Look at what I did last year when I was in Seattle. Look at the last 2 seasons, how I was able to average 38.2 points per game. Look at my quarterback play. Look at my wide receivers. Look at what our offense was and the offensive line. Joe Moore Award winner, it wasn't because we were the biggest and the toughest. It was because we were fundamentally sound and we knew how to execute. I can do that for you. I can make you that type of player. And then as you see guys like Roma Dunze, you see guys like Jalen Polk, you see guys like Michael Penix Jr., and a ton of other talents be ready to enter the NFL, they're better off because they played underneath me. I think you should stick around. At that point, it'll be up for the player to decide, is this going to happen? But make no mistake, as long as you're pitching that, you're showing them evidence of it working, then that's a good sign for you. Listen, it happened in Seattle. You did not know that Roma Dunze was going to be sticking around. And don't think for one second that Ryan Grubb also is not going to work in the SEC. Last season, before Tommy Rees decided to hitch his wagon to the Nick Saban spectacle in South Bend, Indiana, they called Ryan Grubb. Grubb was actually a name that was supposed to already be in Tuscaloosa. So naturally, if Nick Saban agrees with it, why would not Kalen DeBoer? And why should Alabama fans? Number 2, you got to establish recruiting grounds. This will be a very big point that comes in meetings, that comes in conversations with your players, and also when it comes to hiring the rest of your staff. We get it. You're going to keep Ryan Grubb. Offensive concept works. Offense seems to be humming at the right time. Why change what isn't broken? You don't want to go ahead and do that, but that doesn't mean you don't need to go out and hire people who understand the lay of the land in the South. That does not mean you do not need to go out and appreciate recruiting the way that Saban did, or the way that Kirby Smart does, or the way that even Lane Kiffin does, or you could throw Eli Drinkowitz into the mix, Josh Heupel, Brian Kelly. You got to be at the same MO. Because even though Alabama's Script A carries a lot of weight in that big blue and yellow logo that says SEC just means more, we'll be able to land you some players. It will land you everybody. You see the way that Brian Kelly has been able to land a #1 recruiting class for 2025? Yeah, that's going to be the expectations. He's not from the Southern region, but he hired the right people that knew the lay. You look at Kirby Smart, #1 recruiting class this past year. He is from the Southern region, but he also hired the right people that understand every hotbed across the country. And so that will be a key for Kalen DeBoer if he wants to be successful. Now, the other way you can do this is by having conversations with your leaders. Back in Seattle, there was a leadership council, and most teams do have a leadership council. Whoever you believe is on that leadership council in Tuscaloosa needs to be having meetings with Coach DeBoer, and they need to be sitting down and saying, here's where the talent resides. This is where these kids are. And they're going to teach him about certain areas where, 5 stars are blooming. And Coach Saban's going to do that too. Nick Saban is going to have an office. And if you hear the way that Kalen DeBoer spoke at his press conference and in the meetings afterwards, he will have a say. And it would be foolish for a guy like DeBoer not to listen into what Saban knows. Because Saban knows a lot of people, but he also knows a lot of hot spots. And he also knows where to reach out to those people to get the contact and create these type of relationships that will carry over well past his legacy. It will carry over with the next names that come into Tuscaloosa and want to call the Crimson Tide home. It'll come in and it will be that same type of impact. So naturally, you have to hire a staff that understands the process, but you also need to be able to trust your players and exactly what Nick is telling you for you to get the right personnel. And it's not just in the state of Alabama. Yes, Alabama carries a lot of money, and NIL can be flowing because of what Nick wants to do as an outside name helping the university, but it also comes in Georgia, and it also comes in Tennessee, and it also comes in Mississippi. And the 5-hour radius that we know about in college football is going to have to reign supreme. The final thing that needs to happen, I think that you have to realize right now when it comes to Kalen DeBoer, he has to also establish his culture. Every coach is going to want to take advice from other people, but at the same time, your culture is what separates you from everybody else. Now, I'm not saying go overnight and completely rewrite the book Saban that has ran the show for 17 years in Tuscaloosa. But I am saying if you do feel like that you want to make these several small changes, that way it becomes your program and people start to understand this is your team now, you have to start doing it. You can't just expect lightning to strike a bottle twice. It's not going to happen. It never has and it never will. And especially it's never going to happen at a place like Tuscaloosa in the eyes and the departure of a coach like Nick Saban. But you can establish something that will make you fine. For starters, I think Alabama is going to be fine in 2024. They're going to retain a ton of talent. The exodus of players that are leaving are going to hurt. Maybe you won't finish 11-1, and maybe you won't finish 12-0 and make it all the way to Atlanta and hoist up a college football playoff title or an SEC title even. But 10-2 is good enough to get you in the playoff. 10-2 is definitely good enough to get you at least probably a game at home in the playoff. And at that point, then we have to know, where do we follow after this? What are the moves that are going to be made that will help out this team? And at that point, if you go 10-2, well, that's just your baseline when it comes to a guy like DeBoer. You can get to 10-2 with the people that are on campus, plus what you can bring in. And there will be a ton of names that are leaving Washington and leaving a place like Arizona and leaving a bunch of other schools because of their coaches now saying sayonara, and the 30-day window has opened up, and they will look at Tuscaloosa as a pipeline destination. Now, there is one other thing that Alabama fans have to do, and I know that there's a ton of you in the chat, so go ahead and just listen to me for a second. I'm not saying temper your expectations. I'm not saying change the way that you expect things to go on Saturdays. And I'm not telling you to not give Kalen DeBoer a long leash to figure things out. What I am telling you is do not compare him to Nick Saban. The second that you compare him to the greatest to ever do it, you have already failed as a fan base. You have already set yourself up for failure when it comes to your expectations, and you've already dug your grave and the grave of Kalen DeBoer in the imagery. He is not Nick Saban. Nobody is. Nobody ever will be. Nobody will ever come close to the same type of impact that a guy like Saban has made for 17 years. And especially in a world of college football nowadays, where NIL and the transfer portal are going to have a voice, a pretty significant one, where players will leave and go to the highest bidder after a breakout season because they need to do what's best for them. You aren't going to see the same type of epic runs like we saw in the 2000s. You will not see, in my opinion, countless dynasties unfold during the tenures of a 12-team playoff. You will not see teams always have the same type of rosters. They'll carry the same mentality, but that doesn't mean that they'll carry the same outcome every year. It's not going to happen. Kirby's probably the closest that we can compare to Nick Saban because if he has 2 titles and he still has a few more great seasons underneath him before he starts thinking about the next stage of his career. Dabo's not going to get there, in my opinion. I don't think Jim Harbaugh's sticking around long enough to where we can even compare it. So Kirby's the only guy right now that I think actually has a shot. And even then, NIL is going to take away as much as it gives to Athens. NIL is going to lose players in the not-so-distant future. And the transfer portal and the recruiting trails, because of NIL, are going to allow kids to stay close to home. And so that levels the playing field. It doesn't every single year, and it won't probably this year, and it won't probably next year. But 3 years from now, could it? 4 years from now, could it? You're not getting DeBoer 2.0. DeBoer 2.0 is not Saban 2.0. That's not what you're going to get in Tuscaloosa. So as an Alabama fan, be thankful, be joyous, be excited for the future, but also understand your expectations. Keep them at an all-time high, but keep them at DeBoer's all-time high. Don't say this has to be the next Nick Saban, because the second that you think that Saban is irreplaceable, the second that you think his impact and the way that he recruited and the way that he was able to sell a program like Alabama, and more importantly, sell himself to kids is duplicated, you've already lost that battle. Kalen DeBoer is a really smart hire for the Alabama Crimson Tide, and he can do wonders during his tenure in Tuscaloosa, however long that may be. But he has to establish his own culture, build his own relationships, while also re-recruiting the players that are currently on staff. And Alabama fans, you don't have to be patient, but you have to be respectful. You have to realize this is not Nick Saban 2.0, but that doesn't mean the results still can't be the same. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching that video. Don't hit the X button yet. Make sure you hit subscribe to keep up with all of our daily content found on Just Saying It and anything else that we post on this channel. Bye.